Welcome to The Attention Shift, a podcast where sports media gets debated like a VAR decision. Passionately, chaotically, and with none of us fully agreeing on the outcome, right? Hello and welcome to a very special edition of The Attention Shift podcast. Today I've got a very special guest, long-time friend, sometime collaborator, hot on the heels of a major announcement that's happened in the last few days. I've got the co-founder of Goalhanger, Tony Pastor. Welcome, Tony.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Just to give some context about Goalhanger. So Goalhanger now is the UK's largest independent podcast company. 2024, 400 million plus downloads. This year you're looking with, obviously with the introduction now YouTube as well, to get past sort of 700 million downloads. Huge podcast company now. More than that, I know you've been through a rebrand and we're going to come on to that now and in terms of how you see yourselves. But today we're going to talk about the journey that Goalhanger's been on, what's happening this summer, which we'll come on to close to the end, and how just the way of the world of media and content is changing.
Yeah.
So let's go right back to the beginning then, right? 2014, Goalhanger.
That's right.
You founded Goalhanger with Gary Lineker back then. Football was very much in the DNA from the start, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, I left ITV Sports where I had been the controller of the production department. So I'd run the sports production department for the previous 4 years. Had been at ITV for 13 years working on sports productions. So World Cups, Rugby World Cups, European Championships, a lot of big night boxing. Even produced the boat race for 5 years. So I had a very varied career, but pretty much all in sports until that point.
Yeah.
I set up Goalhanger with Gary. And the idea was to largely produce documentaries, usually with big name stars like Anthony Joshua, Wayne Rooney, Kevin Peterson. And we trundled along for 4 or 5 years very merrily and happily, making probably 10 or 12 docs a year. And then in 2019, we decided to experiment with podcasting and the whole world changed.
Yeah, I know. I remember us talking about this as well, because obviously, like, you know, the world of commissioning and production, like no one quite knew what was going on. And that idea of, you know, what do we do now, I guess, became a bit of an ignition point for you guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'd always been a very traditional media company in the sense that we worked for commissioners, and the model in the UK is pretty well known. You have an idea, you persuade hopefully a commissioner at one of the broadcasters. We worked for NBC, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, etc. You'd persuade them of the merits of your idea. They would give you some budget, and you would try and retain maybe 10% margin on that. And there would be the potential of upside if you could sell the show internationally. So, you know, our Anthony Joshua film, I think we sold to 16 countries. And that effectively was how you could make money out of high-end production.
So, okay, April 2019 then. So you've obviously been doing all of that work. And look, yes, it's been successful, but like you say, tight margins, difficult to, I guess, to really scale when you've not got the freedom to do the kind of things necessarily that you want, because you'll be holding a lot of weight to commissioners. So April 2019, you launched We Have Ways of Making You Talk with Al Murray and James Holland. And this was the podcast that started it all. So, you know, go back to that. How did that come, you know, who thinks to do a Second World War podcast?
So that's on me, that, because what happened was I went into Waterstones near to Clapham Junction to buy a book. My dad, myself, very keen history buffs of the Second World War, not least because his father was a soldier in Malta, married a local girl, and that was our kind of family origin story, really interested in the story. I went to buy a book. I went into Waterstones, and 4 of the top 10 books in the history section were about the Second World War. So, you know, Max Hastings, Anthony Beevor, and James Holland, dominating these history charts. I was a big podcast consumer. I walked back out of the shop and I thought, you know what, I'm going to download a podcast about the Second World War, telling me the stories of the Second World War. And there wasn't one. So 40% of the books on sale in Waterstone's history section were about the Second World War, and there wasn't a podcast. So I contacted James Holland. I said, this is what I want to do. Who do you have all the best conversations with? And he said, you're not going to believe it. It's the comedian Al Murray. And the podcast was born on the 2nd of April, 2019.
And I guess for most people, they probably wouldn't expect that Al Murray would also be the historian that he is too, right? He's ultimately become that now, I think.
He was always fascinated by the subject and had studied history at Oxford. He's a bright fella, Al, and really into his subject. And he's got a very personal story as well, a remarkable personal story. His grandfather was killed at Dunkirk, trying to protect the British Expeditionary Force as they left the beaches. His grandfather was killed. His mother was already alive in his grandmother's stomach. She wasn't born yet, but she was a daughter of a soldier who didn't come back. And so Al's been fascinated by the story, as you can understand, ever since. Yeah. And he and James had brilliant conversations. And here we are, 6.5 years later, having done 970 episodes and still going strong.
Crazily. So I guess, in a sense, COVID hitting in 2020, after you've had this idea of doing this, what happened to We Have Ways? And in a lot of ways, is that almost taking you on the journey that you've gone on as a business now?
Totally. I mean, what happened was the podcast was downloaded 4,000 times in week one, very much a hobby at that stage, never going to have any commercial value if it retains that kind of scale. And then it slowly grew, and we discovered that its audience loved it, were passionate about it. We went from 1 episode a week to 2, and then suddenly lockdown came a year later, and we'd grown the audience quite substantially, but then lockdown, as people were unable to get fresh content, they wanted the show more and more. We figured out how to do it remotely. We didn't need to have the lads together anymore. And the consequence of that was we could produce, Al was stuck at home, couldn't go on tour doing the pub landlord. So we produced the show every day during lockdown. And by the time we came out of lockdown, we were being downloaded 300,000 times a week. And we had a very viable podcast that could justify itself in business terms.
I remember you telling me about it when it first happened as well. And then obviously when we went on that journey of watching it and just watching things like Al building models.
Tanks.
Live.
Usually tanks. Yeah. I mean, what I think it tells us is that niche works.
Yeah.
If you've got a fandom for something, it doesn't have to be huge if they're really engaged. And what we discovered there was that this audience was underserved in modern media. It was really well served in traditional media, in books. Yeah. It wasn't well served in podcasting, certainly. And so we served them and they adored it. And the next thing you know, they were demanding more content. We built out a membership club. Yeah. That membership club now has 8,500 people. We provide them with bonus content. We do a live festival every year. We do live streams on YouTube, and we've built out a whole infrastructure around it.
And if I remember rightly as well, that membership in a lot of what you realised that lots of groups around the country were creating their own meetups physically, and actually they just all had something to bond over. And I think that probably gave you the sense of actually there's more to it than this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one of the things that we discovered was that the audience wanted to spend time with each other. It was a community as much as it was an audience. They weren't individuals sat separately on their own. So, well, they were, but they wanted ways to speak to each other. So they would do it through Discord or through the chat on the sidebar of the live YouTube shows. And then they started meeting up, and we now have 16 regional clubs. Scotland, Lancashire, Dorset. The Dorsets meet on a regular basis. By the way, all we do is facilitate it in the sense that we hook the people up together. We don't. It's theirs. They run it themselves. It's not a commercial venture. It's just something that is a fabulous community element of the show.
I think the beauty of that as well, because it's easy for people to start saying, "Oh, everything's digital now. The world's digital." But the reality is the digital there is then driving the physical, because people still want connection
in real life. IRL, as I discovered the acronym. The best example of this is that at the end of COVID, we decided to have a festival to just bring everybody together in a sense of relief and a party, and have a few beers, and Alan James and a few speakers would give talks. 900 people attended. That's 5 years ago, and this year's We Have Ways Festival, FUMF, as we called it, was attended by 5,000 people. So, it's grown enormously.
I know you've been trying to get me there for years, and I finally
turned up this year.
Finally pulled my finger out this year and went with the family. And it was fascinating. I have a teenage daughter, very much into history. She found it fascinating, spending time with reenactors, seeing and hearing the stories. And then every night you've got Al Murray doing cabaret. Yeah. Which is I think an experience like I've never had before, and it was amazing to be around that. But everyone's just so friendly. The food and drink was great too. It just felt like a great experience. And already we're like, right, we're coming next year, as I've already pestered you with. So you can see how that's developed. Yeah. So I guess at this point, right, you're starting to realise that there's a model here probably that's more than just a World War II podcast. Totally. That there are other niche areas that you can potentially get into. So how do you then have the idea then of the next stage, like the rest is stage?
So-
is there something before that, or are
So
you...
one of my colleagues, Jack Davenport, who is the co-founder of the podcast business that we now run together, came up to me one day and he said, what you've done with We Have Ways is really remarkable, building out this community from a niche subject. He said, but you're only covering 6 years of history. What happens if you do the whole lot?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, you're probably right. And so we approached Tom Holland and later Dominic Sandbrook and started a podcast called The Rest is History, which is now the biggest history podcast in the world, 18 million downloads a month.
Wow.
And as you will find out in the next 24 hours, Ed is going to be named by Apple as the #1 podcast on the planet, the first ever non-American podcast to be named #1 podcast according to Apple. So that's embargoed till tomorrow, but by the time this goes out, hopefully that'll be news.
Yeah, it'll be the news. And I think that, like, I find that fascinating that in a world where everything's supposed to be about short form and everything's supposed to be about the quick hit, that history and what you do, which is long form, is now the biggest podcast on the planet.
So it's interesting this, because people keep telling me that, you know, younger generations are only interested in short form, and you know, people describe them in unpleasant terms as the TikTok generation, but actually we're finding the complete opposite. Basically, I think there's been a complete failure to understand what younger audiences want. So we put out 6-part, 8-part, 10-part series on a single subject. You know, the causes, you know, the start of the First World War, the French Revolution, and what we find is that in fact these audiences want it in granular detail. But what they do want is they want brilliant storytelling. They want it really engaging, funny. They want character driven.
Yeah.
They want narrative. And so the average age of a listener to The Rest is History is 33. Half the audience is under 34. So what does that tell you? It tells you that it's a myth that older audiences are the only people who are interested in history, for example. Yeah. Younger audiences are absolutely loving it.
Ultimately, storytelling, right? And
Correct.
I think I always term this as like, the younger people have not got short attention spans. They just don't tolerate shit content.
They've got a much wider choice than when we were growing up, Ed. And so whenever people tell me that young audiences don't have attention spans, I say, well, why do they watch box sets of Stranger Things all in one go?
Yeah, absolutely. So at this point, then, Rest is History, the Rest is brand is starting to emerge.
Yeah,
you've seen what's happening with the Rest is History. Then you've got the Rest is Politics, Rest is Entertainment, and then most recently the Rest is Science, which is my new favourite podcast. So you've clearly found something special there. So next stage, and like you've got obviously the Rest is Politics, right? And Alistair Campbell, who we both know, who's also a Burnley fan, and again, we're recording this the day we're about to go to Turf Moor, so it's actually quite timely. How does that come about then? And then ultimately, you start to see this replicate.
So politics came about because every time we did history series or shows on The Rest is History that had a political aspect to them, the story of Watergate, the Falklands War, things where, you know, you'd be looking at Thatcher or Nixon, you know, when there was a really interesting political aspect to these history stories, they did really, really well. And so we thought, actually, it's only a short step sideways from history to the history of politics to politics. And so I approached Alistair and said, this is what I want to do. And he said to me, there's the podcasting, it doesn't really work, does it? I've done one with my daughter, Grace. You know, it was fun, but, you know, it felt more like more of a hobby perhaps than a business venture, than a media business venture. And I said, well, you're going to have to trust us on that one. We've got a history podcast. In fact, we've got 2 history podcasts that are doing extremely well. So he suggested Rory Stewart. I said to him, we need a Tory. We need a Tory you can have really good conversations with. And he came up with Rory, and it's worked incredibly well. So yeah, we went from politics, then we added Politics US, we added The Rest is Money, which is a kind of more of an economics and business podcast. And we've added entertainment, we've added Classified, which is about spying, and as you say, recently science.
Yeah. And then August 2023, football. Obviously, Gary's also the founder of the business, right? So seemed like an obvious pivot, really. And I guess any reason you'd not done it soon, or was it just because of what Gary was doing in his day job, in a sense?
In a way, we'd done so much sport for so long, and I thought I really, really wanted to prove that we could make shows in different genres and that we weren't just going to rely on a genre that we'd made a living out of for so long. I wanted to prove a point really a little bit.
Yeah.
And then, it got to a point, I think we were in Qatar for the World Cup. I was out there working and Gary was out there with Alan and Micah, and they were asking him about the success of the podcast business. And he said, listen, we should do one together. And they went, absolutely. And that's where it was born. And I think the reason it's become so popular and zeitgeisty is because we said to them at the time, we don't want this to feel like an orthodox television show. It shouldn't feel like Match of the Day.
Yeah.
It should feel like the conversation in the green room before you go on air for Match of the Day. The bit where you feel less constrained by the formalities of the traditional format, and where you can say, you're not going to believe this. It looks like X is going to sack Y. I can't believe he missed that. Where you can actually, and actually the lads wear their hearts on their sleeves. Alan's very much a Newcastle fan in it. Admits he hates Sunderland, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I think the audience really likes that.
Absolutely. I think you see a different side to Alan, right? Because obviously clearly loves to swear, as he does on a regular basis. But I do feel like, not knowing him, do you get a sense of what he would be like if you're spending time with him? He feels pretty normal. Mike is Mike, right? I think he's the same wherever he is. In a lot of ways.
It's been interesting this, because first of all, I'll tell you what I think it's done. I think it's shown the public who Alan really is.
Yeah.
Because Alan's a brilliant, funny, charismatic, top man, and everybody really likes working with him. He's great company. I'm in a fantastic WhatsApp group with all the boys. They can throughout Saturday and in the evening when football's being played, they're all watching it all the time. They're not doing it for a job. They're doing it because they love it, and they're taking the mickey out of each other, and it's brilliant fun. And you get a real sense of their friendship. And I think for Micah, what it's done is it's given him so much airtime compared with the 3 minutes he probably gets on Match of the Day post-match. I think it's shown his serious side, although he's great fun, that he's a brilliant analyst. He understands the modern footballer, and that, he can hold his own. He could be a coach at a very, very high level, I think, Micah, because he really, really understands the game, and the podcast has shown that.
Yeah. So Euro 2024 happens, and then sort of something extraordinary happens, and it really blows up, right? And I think you did close to 20 million downloads and streams across
in a
the
month. And the most interesting thing about it was the first time that the video audience was bigger than the audio audience. That's the first time that had happened. It was only by a little bit, but it was a really significant moment.
I think we've talked about this a lot, and Manny, who's sat here with us as well, he's obviously been part of this conversation where we talked about a lot, didn't we, about will one thing cannibalize the other? And no one could really answer the question. And it was only when you did it when you're like, actually, no, like one thing's fueling the other.
Well, it was very interesting. So I went to Cannes for the Lion Festival, where you get to basically meet CMOs of every business.
I think that's the one where you were in the Spotify thing and I wasn't.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, could be. Although I'm sure I ended up in a bar drinking Guinness with you that night. But anyway, I went to see Alex Cooper, who presents Call Her Daddy, fantastic American podcaster. And she said on stage, when I watch a podcast, and it was the first time I'd ever heard anybody refer to a podcast as a viewing experience, not a listening experience. And I came home from that and said, we were just about to launch the rest of this football. I said, we've got to think about this as a video product as well as an audio one. And we launched it on audio first because we were super nervous about cannibalizing the audience. And then 3 weeks later, we launched it on video on YouTube at the time, and it had no effect on the audio audience at all. What we discovered was that the video audience was completely additional to the audio audience. And now we've just arrived at an extraordinary point. We launched The Rest is Science 2 weeks ago, and 3 times as many people are watching it as listening to it. That's on Spotify video, and that's on YouTube. I'm not even talking about short form across all the social media sites, but it has become a video-first product to the point where it's 3 to 1.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was listening to one of the episodes the other one about space and the message that was sent to space, and I was on the train and I found myself having to flip to the video because I felt like I was missing out everything they were explaining visually. Yeah. And the audio just wasn't doing it justice.
So we have to be super careful with that. And I think that episode in particular strayed very close to the edge of where it was not audio friendly enough. Right. It's actually a really good
I didn't see it as a problem. It actually made me want to see the video.
I think it teeters on the edge of being a problem because we want it to be totally accessible. We want to be agnostic, right? Watch, listen, do whatever you like on any platform you like. And And that I thought was an interesting point because they were literally pointing out things on a poster.
Yeah, this is it. And I was like,
thought,
I've really got to flip this now.
I feel now with The Rest is Football, I have to watch it. I have to watch it because I want to see the guys.
Yeah.
I want to see their reactions. I want to see the fun that they're having. But it's perfectly fine to listen to it too. I felt The Rest of Science is like the first one we've had that it's something you really do want to watch.
Yeah, totally. And what I like about it as well is, and I've mentioned this to you before, and I'm sure you've seen it with your own children as well, that the fact that the rest is history, and they're on reading lists in schools, and went to an open day recently at one of my daughter's schools, and they put it up on screen, and I'm sort of sat there going, yeah, the rest. I think it has transcended. Like I said, it's not podcasting anymore. It's more than that.
I don't want to sound holier than thou, but I think The Rest is History has done something magnificent for history in this country, and indeed in the US now, because it's as big in the US as it is in the UK. And indeed Australia. But I think it's done something fantastic for history. I think it's reignited a passion for history that people perhaps had forgotten. Maybe they haven't really studied history or thought about history or read history since school, and this has brought it right back into the vogue. And the political shows that we make, I think, have changed the tone of voice about how people talk about politics. Alistair uses this great expression that he wants to disagree agreeably, and I think younger audiences are bored of people shouting at each other and polarised politics. And what they like about Rory and Alistair is they don't agree on stuff, but they don't fall out about it.
So post 24, and obviously you're seeing what's happening with video and audio. Now you're starting to see people streaming podcasts, their TVs via YouTube. Spotify start adding video feeds. The production investment that's going into ensuring that the video is then of a quality. And your documentary background, and obviously John, who runs all video for you as well, where he'd come, we've chatted about it with John as well, he'd come through that period, right, where you were going audio, and I think in a sense he was probably thinking, what next? And then video just explodes again.
Yeah.
And he's right at the centre of it, but you as a business are right at the centre of it. Like, at what point did you stop calling it, The Rest is Football, a podcast, and actually it's just a show?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really difficult thing because I keep trying to change the terminology we use from podcasting to shows. In fact, we had a debate this week whether or not we should change the name of the company. So at Company's House, the company is called Goalhanger Podcasts. Should we take the podcast away? Because actually we're just shows, right? We're just a media network. We produce shows, we distribute shows, we sell advertising, we have membership clubs and subscription, we do live events. It's actually a much more broader field of play within the media world. So video is interesting. So we went from audio to audio with very simple video, basically glorified Zoom shot video, to a higher quality version of video. In the last year, we've added LaLiga rights for Spanish football. We've done a deal with British Pathé so that our history shows carry archive. We've done a deal with Getty Images so that we can illustrate who we're talking about in shows like The Rest is Entertainment when we're talking about actors, etc., musicians.
Yeah.
So we've really, really added and made the video richer and richer. That is the idea. And we've really seen the benefits of that in terms of the growing video audience.
And I saw as well that, I mean, just to build on that, obviously the Rest is History, you're doing the Beatles with Conan O'Brien, is it a two-part?
That's right.
What can we expect that to look like as well as sound like?
Unbelievable. I can't quite believe they're letting us do it. I shouldn't even say this out loud, but they basically, the Beatles Trust have basically said, use anything you want. Wow. So all the music, all of the videos, all of the documentary material. And, Tom Holland is a massive Beatles fan. Conan O'Brien's a massive Beatles fan. We invited him over to London. They went to Abbey Road Studios, shot the whole thing there, and we can use anything we like. And of course, we're telling, I hope, a brilliant accompanying story to the documentaries that have charted the Beatles' successes. We're retelling the Beatles' story.
I think that says a lot that they've obviously given, such is the trust now in the business that you've built, that they trust that you'll do it justice and tell a great story. And I think in a long form sense too, and reach an audience that honestly, are they reaching in any other way?
It's a good question. I mean, we're definitely a younger audience than they'll get anywhere else. As I say, half the audience is in their 20s and early 30s, so that makes it unusual.
Yeah.
And also the audience is big, it's got scale. So, we're it's not a puff piece. We're allowed to say what we like, and there aren't controls over it. We did a similar thing recently with Disney. Went out to see Bob Iger at Disney, who runs Disney, and told the story of Walt Disney, which was fascinating. And again, he allowed us to use footage from the movies, all the way back in time to black and white, the very early days of animation. So, yeah, I think this is a whole bold new world.
Yeah. And you touched on LaLiga earlier. Obviously, this partnership now you've got with LaLiga highlights, and I know you were excited about when you did that, because I think basically, and again, we're talking about shows versus podcast, but first podcast to do that kind of deal, to bring highlights into a video podcast. Like, again, where did that come from? That idea that you wanted to transform it in that way?
Well, I wanted to make the content richer, and I wanted there to be a greater reason for audiences to come to the show. So, obviously you can watch Premier League highlights on Sky, Match of the Day, TNT, etc. You can do all that. But so we were basically providing conversation around the live events. The natural next step for us was to say, we're talking about what's happened in the games over the weekend. Can we show what's happened and actually illustrate what we're talking about? Now, the Premier League is obviously, the holy grail of that, and there's probably a few steps still to be taken before that fully happens. But La Liga was available; it was up for renewal. I contacted Media Pro, the agency, and they were up for experimenting. They'd never done a deal with a podcast before, and so fortunately, we have a business model now that provides us with, it makes money. And we're not going to outbid, major TV networks for rights, but we have some money, and we're able to say, let's invest.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to jump to the quick fire questions. So Tony, I've got 25 questions. See if we can get through them. First thing that comes into your mind. You don't have to labour for a long time on them, but you can go as far as you want to go. Okay, here we go. Sports leagues as right holders or content partners?
Content partners.
Biggest barrier to podcast replacing traditional media?
Rights.
Quality or frequency, what wins the audience war?
Frequency.
Best growth lever, algorithm or word of mouth?
Word of mouth. We know that 100% from the rest is history.
Interesting. Biggest problem with podcast discovery?
In a lot of platforms, there's no algorithmic support, so there's nothing that says you enjoyed this, try this.
So in a sense, you have to get people there yourselves.
That's why word of mouth is so important.
Interesting. World Cup 2026, complement traditional coverage or compete with it?
Oh, definitely complement it.
Chemistry or expertise, what matters more for hosts?
Chemistry, and I would go one more than that, and I would say that you don't need people who are the greatest experts in the world, but they need to be brilliant communicators of what they know.
Biggest content sin, too long or too polished?
I wouldn't call either of them a sin.
Best podcast length, 30 minutes or 90 minutes?
For us, definitely 30 minutes.
Scripted sports shows or pure conversation?
Definitely pure conversation across all genres, not just sport.
Biggest surprise about podcast audiences?
Incredibly young.
Own the platform or own the content?
Own the content every time.
Premium subscribers or mass audience?
Both.
Reactive recordings or planned launches?
Well, we do both, but reactive recordings to timely news breaking stories are always our biggest watched and listened to shows.
Podcasting in 2030, what's the biggest change?
It'll look very like television.
Will podcast even be the right word in 5 years' time?
I'm not sure it's the right word now.
Olympics 2028, traditional broadcast or creator-led?
It'll be both. You can't have one without the other.
Biggest tech innovation needed in podcasting right now?
Biggest tech innovation? This is a bit in the weeds, but we would like dynamic insertion of video advertising. At the moment, you can only burn it in. It's pretty limiting. It means somebody in America sees the same advert as somebody in the UK. Tedious for them, commercially worthless for us.
Sports leagues as media companies, inevitable or impossible?
It's definitely not impossible. It may not be inevitable. They may always seek partners.
Hot take, should the BBC be worried? I mean, that's quite wide-ranging, that, to be fair.
No, I don't think so. I just think they need to carry on being very good at the things they're very good at that many other people don't do.
Controversial or podcast charts meaningless?
Podcast charts are pretty meaningless because we don't even understand what allows a show to rise in a chart or fall.
So it's not necessarily based on listenership and viewership?
We often, if you don't mind me saying this, we'll often have 5 or 6 of the top 10. They're never in the right order.
Right, got you. Agree or disagree? Sports leagues don't understand their audiences.
I think they understand them a bit, but they don't care enough because traditionally people have spent enough money through television rights for them not to worry about it.
Last 3 questions. Yes or no? Can creators outbid traditional broadcasters for rights?
Yes. I mean, the likes of Jake Paul will probably prove this.
Bold prediction. What media company doesn't exist in 10 years' time?
I don't honestly know the answer to that, but I think if I was in commercial radio, I would be concerned.
Hot or not? Exclusive platform deals.
They are hot, but I don't think they will necessarily be around forever. I do, however, think there'll always be premium brands that get very, very big exclusive deals.
That's it. Thanks, Tony.
My pleasure.
So, Netflix, the news has broke over the last couple of days. You've done a partnership with Netflix around the World Cup. So, this is obviously massive, right? I mean, I know we've been talking about this for a while, that Netflix is starting to move into the world of video podcasts. What does it mean for you at Goalhanger? And tell us a bit more about what are the plans? What can you say about the plans for the summer?
Well, I can tell you a bit about the plans. We're going to be daily. It's the biggest World Cup ever. It's got more teams than ever, 48 teams this time. The World Cup's going to last longer. We're going to put out a show every day for 40 days. So Gary Lineker will host the show from New York City. We've got some brilliant plans for where the studio is going to be. It's going to surprise a few people, I think. And Alan and Michael will be in the show each day, and we're going to have big name guests, and we're going to make some VTs, and we're going to hopefully have reporters out and about bringing back stories and embedded in camps like the England camp. So yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. 2 years ago we did the same thing in Berlin, but we did it just for ourselves. We did it as it were without a partner, it was amazing. Our numbers were terrific, and this time Netflix approached us and said we'd be really keen to bring the rest of football to Netflix. Interesting, they told us that football's such a dominant story during the month of a major tournament that perhaps there's a sense that people don't need their dramas and their box sets and the stuff that they come to Netflix all the time in quite the same way. And I think what Netflix feel is that being part of the story that's timely, that's going on right then, the World Cup, actually puts them back at the forefront of people's minds, makes them super relevant during that month. So yeah, it's I think it's an industry-defining partnership. It's the first time I can think of a major deal between a show that started out as an audio podcast and came all the way through video and is now a TV streaming proposition. Big deal, I think.
And I'm going to be really cheeky. Can you talk about the size of the deal?
It's a good deal. It's a multi-million-pound deal. We'll be, we have a very generous way of paying our talent at Goalhanger. So we're very collaborative. We share a lot, and our talent will do really well out of it, as they should do. It's it's their show, and they do a brilliant job. So it's a great deal, and we're gonna invest heavily. We're gonna make sure it looks absolutely fantastic.
I think we haven't really touched on the model and how you work with talent as well. But ultimately, you share things equitably with the talent, right? You've never necessarily been about guarantees and upfront payments. I don't think it's about ultimately if they want to come and work with you. They've got to invest themselves in it, but you will make sure that there's equal shares.
Yeah, we I don't talk about individuals and what we pay them, but we are very equitable. we build shows together. We see them very much as being collaborations, you know. Each of our shows hosts benefits if the show does well. And by the way, the opposite is true. They're not given guarantees by and large. Most of them, you know, earn well if it does really well. Yeah. And we're comfortable with that because everybody's super aligned.
Interesting. So just coming back to Netflix then, like just to give us, so who approached who with that? What was sort of like the timeline? You know, how long did it take to sort of bring this together?
You'll be shocked to hear it was not an overnight matter. It took a little bit of time, not least because it's unusual. Yeah, the model's unusual.
It's not the usual thing for Netflix. I've talked about this quite a bit. Netflix tend to home in on short moments. Like they'll do like, you know, the boxing and things like that. They tend to not do things that are over, certainly from a sport perspective, over a longish period of time, which this is, right?
Yeah, it's borderline 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is unusual. And it's also, you know, they don't normally just take an existing IP that's already got its own audience and just transplant it onto their platform.
Yeah, they tend to build things, right?
Yeah, they either build things or they would license things in a slightly different way. So it is unusual. They approached us. We have a relationship with them anyway from going back many years. We know all the commissions there, and I got called in to talk about how we could potentially be collaborative. And I genuinely didn't know what they were going to ask me. I wondered actually whether or not it would be conversation about the rest is history.
Yeah,
which you could imagine, for example, you know, let's say they do a big drama series about Queen Victoria. You could imagine a scenario in which they wanted 6 episodes with Tom and Dominic telling you the true story,
really in-depth explanations
of Queen Victoria. You know, you can imagine an extension, a kind of halo of content around the hero content. But they were interested, but what they said was, listen, we want to talk about the World Cup. And as soon as they outlined their plans, we were really, really keen. It was exciting for us. We produced as I said before, the Euros in Berlin on video, but this was a whole step up. You know, it would allow us to invest in the program to a really high level. Superb studio, great set, loads of ETs, reporters, big name guests. It just allowed us to really scale, and of course, it allowed us to talk to Netflix's audience, which is extensive and global.
Yeah, I think what I like about this as well, and obviously which pretty much all of your content has been based on, right? That it proves that, and something that Lee and Joe, who do this podcast with me regularly as well, we talk about all the time, is kind of like, you don't need rights to be able to do this. Like, people want the story behind the story, and that's what you've. The reality, you know, there's a reality why you're as big as you are, because you've exemplified that. It's ultimately you go deep on stories and not afraid to go deep on it too.
I'll give you a really interesting example of this. During in the run-up to the UK elections, we live streamed immediately off the back of the leaders' debates. You know, the debates between Starmer and Sunak, etc., on the mainstream TV channels. We would do a live stream immediately off the back of them to talk about what we thought of the debate. Those live streams outrated the actual thing they were talking about.
Yeah.
People were more interested in the honest conversation of Alistair and Rory debating it in normal language than the kind of semi-scripted, slightly tedious way that senior politicians often talk to each other on screen. So, you know, it became bizarre that the analysis of the event was watched by more people than the event itself.
But we had the same thing when we did the US election in New York, right? That we did a 24-hour live stream with a few breaks in between, and we found that we got more people watching that than watch traditional media digitally.
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, we realised that actually you can go to an audience and do it in a different kind of way and not be beholden to any particular political message or any agenda or any media agenda, and found a similar audience.
Really good people talking engagingly, intelligently about something they know a lot about is a very attractive proposition to the audience.
And the mix was good as well, right? Because it wasn't all politicians, because you had Marina from an entertainment perspective, Dominic from a history perspective, a procession of very intelligent people coming in between, the mooch dropping in from time to time as well, so a little bit of sparking of stardust. And it did, and like, look, it was a long old stint, right?
It's terrific.
And you went back to some of your old producing days as well.
It was great, directed it. It was wild,
it.
No, I really enjoyed it. It was fascinating, and Dominic Sambrook was the only one who called correctly that Trump would win that night. I think he did himself.
Rory was destroyed. He just looked like a broken man.
Poor old Rory was absolutely certain that Kamala Harris would win, and it obviously turned out to be wrong. But partly, I think that's part of the fun of it is that people were slightly critical afterwards that some of the people got it wrong, and I said, well, look, we asked them to give their honest opinions, not to hedge, not to be careful, and. You can't expect people to talk about football and politics and get everything right all the time. That's not how it works.
So, interesting now. So, what you're doing with Netflix now, and it's going to be fascinating to see. And I mean, is that all? Is it all going to be pre-recorded? Some of it going to be live? Are you still working that out?
It's going to be a mixture. The show's going to be daily, as I say. We're going to record it after the game, so pretty late out there in the US. It is going to be predominantly for a UK audience.
Yeah,
that is our target, but it isn't going to be geo-blocked. You'll be able to watch it wherever you can get Netflix. So, we're hoping that we'll get a significant audience around the world, but it will be British-focused. And of course, the home nations are going to be really well represented out there, so there's going to be a lot to talk about. And I would expect the show to be, 40, 45 minutes long each day, but of course, one of the beauties of podcasting is it can be the length you choose it to be.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I would imagine you'll see us go live on occasions, particularly around England games. But a lot of this still to be worked out.
So, it does feel like a watershed moment, so that a major streaming platform, not just that it's thinking about investing in the World Cup without any rights, right? So in a lot of ways, they're doing it in a very economical way, what they're doing. So it's clever, really, right?
Absolutely. It would be a lot more expensive if they were trying to do a deal with FIFA.
Absolutely. So do you think this is validation for this, and I know the talent, but this creator-led movement that's happening around sports content, this traditional broadcasters versus creator economy? Because you could argue that they're all creators, right? The people that you've got in one way or another. Do you think this is, what does this mean now for the sports media and content world moving forward?
I think it means that traditional broadcasters are not the only show in town anymore. Ed, we're of an age where when we were growing up, we watched our football. As a teenager, I watched it pre-Sky, and I had a choice of watching it on BBC and ITV, and there were very few live games. Sky have done an amazing job of opening that vista up. And I think, the BBC and ITV still do a terrific job of supplying football and sport to the masses. But what we're trying to do is say it's not the only way to talk about the game. There's lots of other ways of talking about the game, and increasingly younger audiences want a different kind of conversation.
Yeah.
I think that's where podcasting fits in. I think it's complementary. I don't think it's going to ever stop. The likes of Sky being very successful with big rights deals and the big stars on their live shows. But I do think audiences want an alternative, and that's what we're trying to provide.
So interesting, I came to see the Resties politics in Manchester recently, and actually you were driving a lot of audience interactivity on the night, and in a lot of ways, like you could argue, it's an obvious thing to do, but actually the way you get the audience involved, do you think there's an opportunity on some of the live shows that you'll do for this, where ultimately the global audience can somehow give their feedback to Gary and Alan and the like in terms of how they've seen the games and how you can bring that into that experience? And
100%. We are super interactive. All of our shows are. I talk about community a lot because I do believe that, unlike a traditional audience that's relatively passive, sat at home on its sofa watching Saturday night television, our audience is much more lean in. It's much more involved. I think our background in podcasting shows us that it's a really intimate experience. You're commuting, walking the dog, cooking, exercising. You've got your headphones on. You're really involved. And I use this term that I've bored you with many times, which is our audience has a parasocial relationship with the hosts. They feel like the third person in a three-way conversation. And though they don't always get to speak out loud, we try to provide them with methods to do so. So our Discord channels are super popular. Our live streams have thousands and thousands of people commenting as we go. And as I say, our membership clubs are very significant. We've got more than 200,000 members of our membership clubs, and that's all people wanting to be more involved.
So this inflection point for the welcome to Netflix. So a lot of work to prepare for that right now, Ryan. Obviously, you've got location, stuff like that. After the World Cup, then what happens? Because obviously this is, there's going to be so much that we learn from how this plays out.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some traditionalists that are not going to love it, right? And there's going to be lots of other people who love the way that in a lot of ways it becomes democratized and it's a different kind of access. Where do you see things going after that? Whether it's just with the rest of football, but in general with how this medium is now progressing for you?
I think I've been saying this now for 18 months, 2 years. There's a major convergence of media forms. So, when podcasting first started out, it was almost a hobby. It was recorded over the kitchen table. It was done on relatively cheap microphones. There was no video, and if you like, Netflix is the kind of super high end, spend fortunes on drama, brilliant productions, wonderful stuff that they make that we all watch. They couldn't have been more diametrically opposed, really, and yet they have converged enormously. And now my feeling is that traditional television is under pressure, particularly kind of traditional commissioning, and budgets are under pressure. And what we're providing is large audiences in areas that people want to spend a ton of time with the hosts.
Yeah.
If you were Netflix, if you were Apple, if you're Amazon Prime, why would you not look at our world? Why would you not say, let's bring our overall cost per hour of production down while still maintaining super engaged audiences? I honestly think there's only one way of travel here.
Yeah. And like I said, you talked there about you thought you were being brought in to talk about rest is history and other things, and it's clear that I've got no doubt that what you're going to create for them is going to be massively successful. And I think you've developed that relationship now. And you talked earlier about obviously the fact that you thought you were going to talk about potentially some of the other shows. I think it's clear that there's bound to be an interest from them in some of the other things you do as well.
Yeah, and look, while it's really important to us and really valuable, and we care about it, I also don't want to do down the fact that our video does brilliantly on Spotify video. It does really, really well on YouTube. We do about 70 million downloads a month across all platforms now, and about 15 million of them on YouTube. That's really, really important and growing part of what we do. And the addition of video on Spotify has absolutely been transformational. We're intrigued by what it's done to our audiences on Spotify, and we're big partners with Spotify. They're very good to us, and we're good friends with them. And they've really helped us to find new audiences, especially around the world. Yeah. They've really helped us in the States. And I think video has been a really important part of that.
Cool. So a couple of things. So you've recently rebranded.
Yeah.
Why did that come up? Why did you feel the need to rebrand? What are you trying to get across now with this rebrand, refocus?
I think we're trying to say that we're a super modern media company, and that we are not just a podcast business. That we are, I hope that we're pretty high end. If you look at some of the aesthetic that Stephen Mai, our CMO, came up with his designers, what we've really gone for is that kind of like high-end glossy magazine aesthetic. So I think a lot of our shows' thumbnails are gonna start to look like they could have been on the New Yorker or the Sunday Times or on a fashion magazine. And I really feel like we wanted to get that sense of like, I'll tell you what, how he sold it to me. He came in and he had a beautiful picture of Zinedine Zidane in black and white with the Goalhanger logo over it. And I just fell in love with it at that point. Because for me, as a massive football fan, and I've been lucky enough to see Zidane play many times and adored him as a player, he exactly exemplifies where we want to be, which is super smart, engaging, entertaining, really good at what they do, and of course with a bit of the maverick about it, and a little bit of the unpredictable, and I just loved the image, and I said that's exactly where I want to position us.
I think in a lot of ways that's tied in nicely. You're doing the Rest is Fest at the South Bank Centre next year, which is effectively you taking over the whole of the South Bank Centre with all of your all of your properties. That must feel like it must be amazing to have the a lot of work, but the proposition, like the idea of that coming around.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to do because it's 75 years since the South Bank opened, and Royal Festival Hall is a magnificent building, but so too are the Purcell Room and the Queen Elizabeth Room, which are next door. We're going to use all of them. We're going to use 4 venues within the site. We're going to put on about 28 shows. We've got to sell nigh on 30,000 tickets, but I think it would be brilliant to be able to bring all of our shows together. We're going to do some fun mashups and crossovers with I think, if you saw, by the way, if we do end up doing, if Micah Richards ends up on stage with Anthony Scaramucci discussing American politics, things will have gone in an extremely unusual way, but we are going to do some fun crossovers. That South Bank was opened up as a festival of ideas and a celebration of Britain, and I'm hoping in a small way we can do a little bit of that next September.
That'd be amazing. So final thought. So June 11th, 2026, opening match of the World Cup. The rest is football going live on Netflix. What are you hoping happens?
Well, I hope people watch it. I mean, that is the unknown, and we can't control that. One of the beauties of media is that you only get the audience you deserve in the end, and many people don't get the audience they deserve. They get smaller audiences because discovery is difficult and competitions out there, and there's a lot of things people can watch. So I would be delighted if people watch it and really enjoy it and come back the next day.
So anyone who's not heard of The Rest is Football, where can they find it to watch or listen to it before the World Cup?
So The Rest is Football, it comes out 4 times a week, 3 times with Gary, Alan Shearer and Micah Richards, talking about the Premier League, talking about the Champions League, talking about all football around the world. And then once a week on a Tuesday, Gary is joined by Alex Aljo, and we talk about LaLiga, and we get to show the goals, which is wonderful. Right. You can listen to it on Apple, you can watch it on Spotify, and you can watch it on YouTube.
So, and last question, obviously you've got lots of big podcasts in there, but what's one show that you do that people might not be aware of that you would recommend from your stable?
So we make a program called The Rest is Classified, which is all about spy stories. David McCloskey, former CIA agent based in Damascus, Syria, is the host, along with Gordon Carrera, former intelligence correspondent of the BBC. These boys really know their stuff, and it tells amazing stories. This weekend, I listened to a 6-part special about the attempt by Yevgeny Prigozhin to overturn Putin's power in Russia. Absolutely electric. I'd strongly recommend it.
Cool. Tony, thanks so much for your time today. Fingers crossed we get a win tonight, because that's the most important thing we're doing today.
We travel more in hope than expectation.
Absolutely. But thank you so much for your time. I've been Ed Abis, and this has been The Attention Shift. That's it for this episode of The Attention Shift. Remember to like and subscribe and listen to us next time. And do let us know what you think. Email us at hello@attentionshift.media. That's hello@attentionshift.media. Goodbye.